we're also keeping that human element as well, because that's what has a really big impact. So being unique, which AI is not great at doing, and also being human is important. So to me, it's really exciting, because people who really buy into this and really love the technology are going to use AI and get great results. And then people who don't buy into it, they are going to get left behind, for sure. AI is going to have this massive impact. But to me, I think it's still the hammer. It's not taking over the job. It's still just an amazing tool.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. I'm your AI host, Mark Verbenkoff's deepfake avatar, and this is episode number 222. Marketing has undergone a dramatic transformation over the past 2 decades. What was once largely driven by intuition and creative instinct has become a discipline increasingly shaped by data, analytics, and experimentation. In this episode, we explore how the rise of digital platforms, search engines, and social media fundamentally change the way businesses reach audiences and measure results. The conversation dives into the emergence of generative AI and its growing role in marketing workflows, from analyzing customer data and building highly targeted campaigns to generating content at unprecedented speed. While AI tools are accelerating productivity and opening new possibilities, they also raise important questions about creativity, authenticity, and the human role in marketing strategy. Looking ahead, the episode explores how businesses can stay visible and competitive as AI-powered search tools and chatbots reshape how people discover information online. In a world where technology evolves rapidly, success may depend on combining powerful AI tools with something machines still struggle to replicate. Now, a little bit about the guest. Mike Maynard is a self-confessed geek who loves talking about technology. Mike offers a unique blend of technical and marketing expertise. Mike began his career as an electronics design engineer, developing products from complex radar systems to recording studio mixing desks. Mike believes that combining the measurement, accountability, and innovation that he learned as an engineer with a passion for communicating means his clients can achieve their marketing goals sooner. Mike and his team at Napier specialize in increasing the speed prospects travel through clients' sales and marketing funnels, generating opportunities more quickly. Their unique approach to campaign strategy designs in speed to campaigns from the outset, building integrated campaigns that focus on the important tactics, whether clients need to increase awareness, generate leads, or engage contacts to create opportunities.
Right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the podcast today to talk about something that I'm very interested in, the future of marketing. I think we're going to hit a number of different kind of general points and maybe get into a couple specific discussions. I'm very much looking forward to it. So thanks for coming on.
It's great to be on the podcast. Thank you for having me as a guest, Mark.
Yeah. So, we're obviously going to talk about artificial intelligence as well. But with regards to, marketing, technology, what's maybe not your background, but like what brought you into doing the work that you're doing today?
Well, I'd love to claim it was all planned, but it wasn't. When I was at school, I was going to be a mathematician. And whilst at school, I got a chance to build like a lighting control system for the school theatre. So, almost pretty much just before I applied to university, I decided, no, I'm going to be an electronics engineer. And then I, did my degree. I was an electronics engineer. And I realized I was a bit rubbish at being an electronics engineer, actually. It wasn't for me, but I was great at talking about it. So I then became, a technical support engineer, worked for a semiconductor company, ran their technical support operations in Europe, and then realized kind of that was, my limit. I had to find something else, either go to America where there was more opportunity, or alternatively, look for something else. And the opportunity to move into marketing opened up in this company in Europe, and so I decided to take it. Again, completely unplanned. No career plan ever in my life. And then, of course, they send you away on, these executive courses. On one executive course I went away on and, had some drinks. Everyone was very sociable. Someone said to me, "You should run your own business, Mike." And I think what they actually meant was they're being very polite and very British, and they actually meant, I don't ever want to be your boss. But they said, you should, and I thought that'd be a great idea. And then literally about 2 months later, the agency I was using, my contact phoned me up and said, the people who started it want to retire. They want to sell the business. You should buy it. I thought, can't be that hard, can it, to run an agency? So I decided to buy a tech agency about 3 weeks before the dot-com crash. And as it turns out, that makes it quite hard. So that's kind of how I ended up here. It was all very accidental. I've been very lucky in my career choices. I mean, I moved into marketing, in 2001, just when things were moving into digital and when actually, understanding numbers suddenly started mattering in marketing. And so, things worked out, and the agency's done great since then.
Well, great. Well, congratulations, and it's interesting to hear that. So you've been in the space for some time. Maybe a good place to start then is, before we dive into AI and all the changes that are happening now, how has the space evolved over the last, say, 20 years or so, before this Gen AI, craziness started?
Well, I mean, this is going back a long way when I started in marketing, back last century, which sounds a long time ago, and it was, yeah. So I think there's two things that have really changed. The first is, back in the 90s and prior to that, it was very much Mad Men. People were, yeah, I think this is cool. It looks great. Let's do it. It's going to boost the brand. It was all very subjective. There was no real, analytical analysis of what was working. Maybe for some consumer brands, they could afford research-based analysis, but basically it was very much, you try something, it's gut feel, you hope. And if you have very good creatives, it works really well. And then the second thing was that distribution was actually very hard to come by, and very expensive. So if you wanted to get distribution, you were typically, buying access through a publication, so paying for an advert, or doing PR, or some other complex way, using a trade show. What's happened now is there's a lot more data, there's a lot more analytics, so there's a lot more testing, and frankly, it's a bit of a joke in the company sometimes that, we'll run Google ads and we'll have bets on, which headline's going to be best. And generally speaking, I'm not great at it. I'm normally great at accidentally putting a good headline in, but, I'm not great at picking the number one headline. So there's a lot more data. And also distribution is much easier to get now. There's far more channels. We didn't have search, we didn't have social. You didn't build your own website. But I remember talking to, just before I moved into working for an American some kind, I talked to them. I said, we've got to go for email. This is back in the late 80s. They were like, but no one will ever use email if fax is around. And so, as it turns out, I was right there, and so I'm proud of that. But now you've got email you can reach people by. You can still do posts, that still exists. All these channels exist. So there's a whole range of distribution channels. It's much more fragmented. It's easier to access the channels, but the channels are much more noisy because there's not, somebody having to gatekeep or charge you to access the channel. So it's actually a massive change, even ignoring AI, which has been, probably the biggest impact. The whole world of marketing has changed probably as much as any industry ever has.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I guess also the amount of people, not the amount of people that you can reach, but the amount of people that are becoming more, shall we say, active on these platforms. Like, the email, I don't know. I'm assuming it was rather stagnant, and then it was all at once, or within a couple of years, the numbers increased dramatically. But same thing for, like, social media. It was not very many people, and then it was just kind of all of a sudden, right? If I remember correctly, I was a little bit younger then.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things turn very quickly.
Yeah.
I think, previously people underestimated things like word of mouth. Word of mouth matters. Years back, I did my MBA dissertation was all around, who people ask when they decide whether they want an Intel or an AMD PC. Back the first time that AMD was really competing with Intel, AMD's back again, which is great. But, word of mouth really mattered then. Word of mouth actually still matters now, but you've got all these other channels and all these other ways to access people.
So interesting. Okay, so that's how things were. Things have changed over the last couple of years, and maybe also a good question here is, the hype versus the reality, right? Because I think there's so much noise, as you said properly before, about how specifically AI, generative AI, is changing the marketing world, or it will change it. Maybe it will, but maybe we're not seeing all the changes right now. There's still a lot of like AI slop that comes out there, and people are pushing back against, oh well, I don't like this ad, or this image is obviously Gen AI, and you get a bunch of negative comments and stuff on that. So there's hype versus reality. So it's been I think we're closing in on what, 3 years since ChatGPT kind of made its big splash. How have things changed specifically in the last 3 years for you and the work that you're doing?
So, I mean, my favorite thing to talk about with Gen AI is that there's been lots of research studies that show that if you build Gen AI models and they're trained on what's publicly available, basically the model gets better and better really fast, and then it starts plateauing, and it plateaus at just below the average person in that sector. So when I've got a group of people you're talking to who are in marketing, ideally an even number, and you say, it plateaus just below average. So if you're above average, your job's safe. And you can see people look at each other going, am I above average? Am I?
That's great.
So,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting thing. I think, and things could change because, obviously a lot of companies are working on other approaches, but the large language model approach is not going to replace everybody in marketing. And probably in most industries isn't going to replace everybody, because you're not going to get the things that are delivered by the people who are really super creative. You're not going to get things delivered by the people who've really got in-depth knowledge. But what it's going to do is it's going to massively cut the amount of time it takes to create things. It's a fantastic tool. And it is also going to replace, certain people. So what we've seen, probably more than actually losing people and replacing them with AI, is actually clients are demanding more of us. So, as an example, we'll have clients and now they might throw us their, customer list, and they'll say, we've got some idea about this customer list, but, we want you to go out, analyze the data, and then work out which customers we're missing out on. And AI is actually fantastic at doing a lot of that. It's not very great at maths and being, super accurate, but if you want an idea of which segment the customer fits in, what they're probably building, AI can be very efficient. So we can run through and we can do that analysis, in hours with AI. It's really quick. And we can build them a target list and then start running account-based campaigns to them. Actually, if I look back, 5 years before ChatGPT, nobody asked us to do that. And the reason nobody asked us to do it was just too hard. And actually, it was better to understand, we sell to a lot of companies in the military space. Let's go and just market in military trade publications. So it's definitely changed hugely. But then in other areas, it hasn't changed particularly. Now, we are in a super specialist niche. So we deal with high-tech B2B companies, engineering companies. And so things like content generation, actually AI's had a fairly limited impact on. Because all it's doing is, AI fundamentally is taking your prompt, taking what it's already seen, combining the two, and then producing something that is somewhat a derivative work of your prompt and what's already available. A lot of our companies have developed stuff that's never been seen before. And AI is just terrible about writing about something completely new. So we've not seen as much impact there. We do see a lot of use in Gen AI and things like, interview notes. When you talk to, experts on particular subject, it's great for summarizing that. So again, it's that tool. It's an amazing tool. But I don't think it's going to replace everybody, at least, not in its current form.
Right. Yeah. And this is a consistent theme that I keep hearing on the podcast. There's obviously a couple of people that say, it's going to replace us all, or, give it 10, 15 years and then have another discussion. But generally what I'm hearing now for the kind of short to medium term, it's an augmentation tool. It can really augment yourself, your workforce, so that you can get, whatever percentage, 10, 15, 20, 50% more effective, more efficient than you were before using it. And, my assumption here, from what I've heard as well, is if you're not using it, you're going to be left behind by those that are, because of that force multiplier, by that, efficiency increase that you're going to get from using it, whether it's, text or images or, maybe video, in the marketing space anyways.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of a simplification. I think, people left in industry are going to be using it. That's a given. But I think it is going to hit particular areas. I mean, for example, if you look in software, the number of entry-level software jobs over the last 2 or 3 years has just collapsed. And I know it really well because my son actually graduated as a software engineer, and he had this problem of trying to find a job. And when he started his degree, everyone's like, this is a degree that's guaranteed to have you walk into a job. And at the time it was.
Right.
And actually, because AI's come in, it's replaced a lot of what entry-level software engineers were doing. And so you don't need as many of those junior software engineers. And so actually what happened is a lot of companies said, right, we're not going to hire any for a couple of years. And it's completely destroyed the jobs market.
Right.
There's been a similar impact, I think, in some areas of marketing, where, again, those junior jobs have been impacted. But what we're seeing, and this is not anecdotal, I've seen other, people report the same thing, is that actually a lot of the more senior, frankly, the old guys, and in marketing, when I say guys, typically it's women rather than men. But if you look at the old people in marketing, they're taking advantage of AI. They understand it's important. And actually some of the younger people are less proactive at taking advantage. So I think, that the market's in real flux. It's really interesting. And then AI gives you the ability to scale where you couldn't do things individually. And to me, perhaps that's the most interesting thing about AI, because, as I said, AI can do things to kind of an average marketer's level, but it can do it, 1,000,000 times a second.
Right.
And that's a very interesting difference.
Yeah, it's I think it's also interesting as like a business owner thinking about, well, maybe, some new business owners says, oh, well, I'm going to fire everybody and I'll just have AI agents do all the work for me. But if you're saying, yeah, well, it's only going to get to the average marketer, then you're only going to have an average, army of AI bots doing these kinds of things. I'm also thinking maybe, we should discuss maybe some specific areas of marketing, because I know that we have a number of business owners that listen to the podcast. And if they're thinking, shoot, I was focusing on SEO, for instance, for the last 10 to 15 years or something like that, and that's where, the vast majority of my business is coming from. And now there's these AI summaries, and there's only kind of like 3 businesses up at the top, or 3 websites at the top. That I think is a bit of a tangible change for businesses that I still think, I get the sense, are scrambling. They don't know what to do, not sure of how this is it going to grow? Is it going to be shut down by Google? So there's a little bit of, I think, confusion around there. So maybe we can start touching on maybe some tangible verticals here.
Yeah. So I think, the AI chatbot replacing search is a really interesting discussion. The first thing to say is it's not replacing search. I think Google actually said recently that their search volume's growing. So it's not replacing search, but it is having a big impact. And in some areas, it's really, really important to feature in these AI results. Now, the good thing is that there is definitely a correlation between good search engine optimization and what people are calling generative engine or answer engine optimization, so AEO or GEO. If you've got good SEO, you'll probably do okay there, but actually you need slightly different content. So, as an agency at the start of the year, we could see this happening. We realized that, we're generating a lot of technical content for clients. If it doesn't appear in these answer engines, they're not going to succeed, because increasingly people are going to ask AI which product they need to select. So we started working with a startup, and we actually partnered with a startup company called Brandy, free plug to one of our partners there. And they have developed an amazing GEO tool that's really, really effective. And, we literally haven't had a client say no when we suggested a demo. Everybody wants to see it. Everybody really cares about it. And it's a big concern because without doubt, as we look forward, over the next year or two, people are going to go to AI more and more. They're going to use conventional search less. There is an argument that what AI is doing is basically putting a more verbose kind of, veneer over the top of search results. So to some extent, it's not completely changed, but actually AI wants slightly different content to a classic search engine. So that's a massive change that we're seeing. And, that's absolutely going to impact businesses. I mean, you're going to see traffic from search, really shrink because people are going to take the AI answer and they're going to use that. They don't need to click through. So as a business, that really matters. You've got to feature in those AI answers. And then in the future, what's going to happen? And in our situation, for example, we market semiconductors to engineers designing circuit boards. Are those engineers going to have AI bots? Are those AI bots going to talk to other AI bots? And so you can see this getting, quite challenging because it's going to become more and more automated. So I think, the first step is to make sure you rank within the current Gen AI answers. So that's really a big important thing for anyone thinking about how they're going to be visible on the web in the future.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I think it's also, I don't want to say terrifying, but I'm pretty sure that there's some businesses, they're busy now. They're getting enough leads and work from the things that have been working for so long. And then there might be someday where, who knows, Google flips a switch and the algorithm changes a little bit and they go, their volume, their search volume, their interest dies, substantially overnight, and then kind of scrambling. Whereas, the competitors have been working at this for a couple of years, and well, I guess it's general disruption, which happens within kind of any new technology in any industry. But to me, it just seems a little bit faster and maybe more widespread, more wide scale than maybe before.
I think it's easy to say it's faster. I mean, generally speaking, because the internet infrastructure is here, I think changes do happen faster. But, I can remember, as I said, I used to be a technical sales person. I was, selling displays to engineers building systems. And literally, in about the space of 2 years, it went from, I could get a meeting with almost anybody because for one particular supplier, there were 50 data books available in the UK. And so every engineer interested in that product wanted one of those data books because you couldn't design without it. And so if you wanted to get a meeting, you offered the data book, you got a meeting. 2 years later, all that data was on the internet. And it was all on the supplier's website. So the data book just vanished overnight.
Right.
And so suddenly it became really hard to get sales meetings. It was much harder to sell the product. Then once that had happened, people were getting, good rankings through, the early SEO tactics. Suddenly Google started cracking down on what they thought was SEO spam. I mean, I know someone who sold a business, and they got less than half of what they were told the price was going to be because it was all based on, having traffic. They did very well, so I think they're okay. But, there were a lot of publications that were sold and then Google changed the algorithm, their traffic went down. And so the founders of those publications, rather than getting a payout over 3 years, got the initial one and then nothing else. So these things change all the time. Is AI going to change it? Yeah. Is it going to be more than the introduction of the internet? Probably not. I don't know. It could be.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll have to wait and see, I guess, or live and see, as we'll see. Another one of these verticals is you mentioned it briefly. Content generation, like video, for instance, right? We're seeing more and more, the social media platforms, anyways, just require video to get any kind of attention. And you mentioned before the recording, this idea of sameness with the generated content based on, how it learns and how the content is generated in the end. Could you touch on that a little bit? Maybe filter in the sameness and then what kind of impacts this is going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, I feel as a marketer, even though we don't do consumer marketing, I've got to mention the Coke Christmas ad. So the AI generated Coke Christmas ad, if, you've seen it and think it's great, just look at the trucks and look at where the wheels are on the trucks from shot to shot. And these wheels are moving all over the place, and they're completely unrealistic. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And every time you see the ad again, it's just like, yeah, that's not great AI.
Right.
So, and Coca's got more money than most of our clients. So, generating great AI video is hard. I think, what's going to happen is that people really care about the content, what's interesting, what's new, and what's different. And I think you can, for example, take an AI avatar, and you can get that AI avatar to say something really new and really interesting, but you've got to put some effort into it.
Yeah.
And so can you save time over recording video yourself? Yeah. I mean, it's a pain to record video yourself, particularly if you want it to look good. And so, you can generate content with an AI avatar. That's probably going to be better and certainly easier than trying to generate live video. But will it be more effective? Gut feel is certainly in the near term, for most people, it's going to be less effective. There are absolutely going to be AI avatar superstars. I mean, I think we all understand that.
Yeah.
But they're not superstars because they're AI avatars. They're superstars because the people behind it are making those avatars say and do interesting things.
And based on your previous comment about, these ChatGPT or LLMs or whatever, only creating an average, the average level marketer's content, then you need to have a real, maybe not genius level, but you need to have a real human behind that AI avatar, really thinking and really creating the content in order for that superstar to come about.
Well, I think the problem is that, because the cost of creation of the AI avatar is so low, there's going to be so many, there's going to be so much noise that it's going to be so difficult to stand out. You've got to have something exceptional. And everyone's going to type, the ideas into a ChatGPT or whatever to try and get a script. So there's going to be so many, like, kind of okay, but very similar avatars. People will get bored of it. I mean, the one interesting thing I was actually just reading yesterday, there's been someone doing some research. I wish I could quote the paper, but increasingly, like, the average person is liking AI generated avatars more than real people in terms of the image.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
because
I've heard this.
the AI avatars look very average. They're also a combination of a lot of faces, and it feels comfortable. And so that's one area. But your problem is your AI avatar is going to look just as average as everybody else's.
Right.
And I think, can you create great content, entirely in AI? Possibly. You might be able to. Is it any different from what anybody else can create with AI? No, it's exactly the same. So if you want to stand out, you've got to do something different. And I think that's going to be the most important thing.
Interesting. Yeah. So it kind of seems like there's going to be this vast ocean of mediocrity, and then there's going to be a couple winners, and then there's going to be also the people that are using AI avatars and make it all wrong, and it's going to look horrible, and the content's going to be bad as well. With this in mind, do you think that there's going to be, I guess, like we see in many other technological breakthroughs or spurts, if you will, there's going to be a backlash, and there's going to be kind of a non-AI marketing teams or individuals? We can focus on like the influencer if we're talking about AI avatars and stuff. Do you see that there's going to be something like that, or is it just going to be so overwhelmingly easy to use these AI tools that people are just going to naturally gravitate towards it?
I think what's going to happen is people who gravitate to the AI tools and don't have something special are going to be disappointed. So the great example I give is sport. So if you look at sport, for example, I play cricket, which some of your listeners will be familiar with, a lot of your listeners won't. But English baseball for the American listeners. And when England plays cricket, you can't get a ticket. They sell out large stadiums for 5 days. I mean, these games go on for 5 days. People sit there for 5 days. You have to fight for a ticket for just one of those days. When I play cricket, there might be someone walking their dog who turns and watches. Does it mean our cricket games are boring? No, they can be quite exciting. But because the skill level isn't up there, there's not that interest. People, if they're going to spend time and going to invest in watching a game, they want to watch one of the better ones. I think the same thing applies to, AI created content. Yes, the content's okay. Yes, it can be interesting. But if it's not elite, then why are people going to spend time when elite content exists?
Right. Okay, so to maybe push back on this a little bit, we're talking about, the average avatar, the average content, the average video or images that are being made. But is it not also the case where you can have this AI generated media that is personalized to your specific audience, right? So you mentioned that you have a very specific niche, might not work because it's so specialized. But maybe for like more generic marketing agencies, for instance, you can have highly personalized AI generated content that's specific to your client's needs. So is that kind of contradicting the idea here in this particular instance, or what are your thoughts?
So that's a fascinating question, Mark, because obviously one of the ways you get away from all of the AI noise is you specialize and you go into a very specific niche. And so people who do that can actually, maybe be successful with perhaps slightly less quality because there's less competition in that really specific niche. If you niche it down to one individual customer, so you personalize, then absolutely, you've then got something which is a niche of one. And if there's no competition, maybe I'm going to spend time looking at that. The challenge you've got with using AI personalization is firstly the reliability, and it seems like we're stuck with hallucinations. And so seeing the AI personalized content will eventually involve seeing hallucinations that are really irritating. Not all the personalizations are really irritating, I have to say. My other sport is speed skating. You can type into some of the AI models who's the greatest speed skaters in the world, gives a great list. It's really good. And then with Google's Gemma, so the one you host locally, you can actually say, hey, what about Mike Maynard? Isn't he one of the greatest speed skaters? And Google Gemma at the moment, and I know this because I do this pretty much every day to boost my ego, gets back and goes, oh, he's amazing. He got a gold medal here. He did that. Complete rubbish.
Right.
No, in all seriousness, I think hallucinations are a big problem because you will get content that is, not on brand, not accurate, frankly, can be wrong. And that could hurt your brand a lot more than, 20 great bits of personalization. So there's a balance. We've also found that, AI isn't great at individual one-to-one personalization unless you have really, really good individual data. And most marketers don't have as much data as they'd like on each individual. So are people going to use AI personalization? Absolutely. And there's going to be guardrails. And, that's going to make the personalization a little bit more bland, but it's going to be a lot better than, hi, Mark, as someone who runs a podcast. Would you like to buy a microphone? A kind of Amazon type personalization. So it'll be much better than that, but it probably won't be as compelling as people think because of the risks, because of the problems.
Okay. I want to switch gears here a little bit because I think the framing of the conversation that we're having right now is that as, say, marketers or as, business people, we're having a choice between whether to use AI content or not. You can correct me on this point if you have heard differently. I've heard rumors that, say, Facebook, for instance, or Meta, I should say now, is starting to creep towards kind of how should I say this, like a not personal manipulable ad engine, right? So if you say, well, I want to run ads for, say, landscaping, right? Then you just say that to Meta and it will generate all the content for you and force the ads out. So there might not even be, and again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it just might be rumors, in the future at some point, you might not even have the choice to use your own personal content. So maybe I'll leave it at that and you can comment on there.
Well, this is where I could get into trouble. So if anyone from Metro or Google are listening, if you could just, stop it now and skip forward 10 minutes. So I think that you've got to balance there the benefit to the advertiser and the benefit to the platform. And what we have seen, and I think what everybody believes, is that if you can get super hyper targeted, you get great results. And that's one of the reasons why Facebook and LinkedIn and, these other social platforms and Google on search, they're so popular because you can be very specific in your targeting. You can advertise on Google search on a keyword that's typed in, once a month in the whole of Europe.
Right.
And be super specific and spend next to no money and get loads of business from it. Unfortunately, Google and Facebook don't really love that. Because that's not making them money. What they want is people to actually spend money on broader targeting. And so the Facebook AI thing, I think partly hype. I think what they want to do is they want to try and give this message that it's going to be super easy for anyone to go to Facebook and get great advertising. And the reality is for, the majority of advertising campaigns, it'll do fine. It'll be great. AI again, if it hits the average kind of specialist Facebook marketer, and I run, for example, a dog grooming salon, and no disrespect to people who run dog grooming salons, but I figure most of them, their first concern is dogs and not marketing. And so if they can get up to the average Facebook marketer just themselves without paying anyone, that's got to be a great deal. I mean, it's fantastic, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those campaigns are going to match the best campaigns on Facebook. And so I think there's a little bit of a battle, and to some extent Facebook is a little bit relaxed, and Google as well with some of the things they're doing with search ads. They're a little bit relaxed about, maybe we're going to make the campaign less effective because it's still going to be better than anything else. So there's an interesting balance. And, I think maybe I've come across as being a little negative on AI. I don't think people are not going to use AI. Everybody's going to use AI, but I think it's appropriate, and it's like carpenters. Every carpenter's going to use a hammer, but if you want to split a piece of wood into two, it's probably not the right thing to use.
Good analogy. I see our time is winding down here a little bit. We did talk a little bit before the recording about, legislation and some laws. Maybe that's a good place to kind of end the podcast, unless there's like maybe one or two other specific verticals that we should be talking about. We talked about Facebook, SEO, Google Ads, a little bit on social media, but I think that's been talked about to death on other platforms as well. If there's one other thing that you think we should be talking about, if not, we can discuss the legislative aspect.
Well, I think one of the things that is really interesting is what AI is doing to data in marketing. So I don't know if I can talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And now I've turned off the engineers because we're talking about marketing, and I've turned off the marketers because we're talking about data, but hopefully someone's still listening. And one of the really interesting things is that marketers have always struggled with data. And partly because, marketers generally, I mean, I'm an exception, but generally come from a creative background and are not so focused on the numbers. And partly because, and I'm going to be honest, it's really, really hard to actually analyze how well your marketing campaigns work. I mean, one of my examples is we worked with a client for a long while who actually built baggage handling systems for airports. Their typical sales cycle was 15 years. So how are you going to tie like a Google Ads campaign to something that might get bought in 15 years? It's almost impossible. And so marketers, and around about, 7 years ago, the thing you had to say as a marketer was, well, I'm going to employ a data scientist. And what happened was these marketing teams had data scientists, and they were the geeky guys sat in the corner, and they did lots of really good stuff, but nobody really understood what they did and nobody really used it. And now what's happening is that marketers can put data into AI chatbots, and they can have conversations about the data in the way that they speak. And obviously chatbots are great at talking back to you roughly in the way you talk. It's really changed the way marketers use data. So I'm hopeful because, marketing's been hit by this, like, we'll just measure all our performance on click-through rate, which is an absolute terrible metric in almost every case. So marketers don't have to do that now. They can actually start measuring the impact on the business. And AI is great for pulling across, multiple data sets. So for me, that's a really exciting thing. And hopefully it means marketers are going to get campaigns running that are much more effective.
Interesting. Yeah, which is I think maybe more interesting for everybody, because then you get more personalized or more interesting content to the user. It's better for the business. It makes the marketer seem like they know what they're doing a little bit more. It's kind of a win-win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people want privacy, and we'll talk a little bit about legislation in a minute, but people want privacy because they don't want creepy ads.
Yeah.
They don't want ads that really make them feel uncomfortable, but they do want ads that they care about. If I see an ad for a cricket bat, that's great. I play cricket. I love it. It's fantastic. I'm really happy to see that. If I see an ad that is very specific about a bat I looked at, 2 minutes ago on another website, that's kind of crossed the creepy line, and I don't like it.
Yeah. Or spoke about or thought about, right? Which is there's been some discussions about, you think about certain things, and these technologies are able to pick up like brainwaves and things like that. I think that is the next level when it comes to this creepiness factor that you're talking about.
And as a marketer,
yeah,
I'm not going to guarantee 100% because you never guarantee things 100%, but I'm going to tell you, I don't believe any of those stories. I believe that actually the signals that are given out by you and also people are so strong that, if you think about or talk about something, it's probably actually been, you've left some digital footprint, or someone you work, you talk to, or that Facebook knows is in your family, has left a digital footprint. So I do think that, people are overhyping this, spying on you. That's not happening. But actually maybe underestimating the use of data.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Like if you're talking about cricket, right, you might be talking about different aspects of cricket, and then you get, whatever Gatorade that comes up or something like that. It's like, oh, I was thinking about Gatorade. Well, it's just because, you're dehydrated after 5 days of playing cricket, and, all these kinds of things that leads to the next logical conclusion. Oh, this, Mike wants Gatorade.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'd never say no to Gatorade. So
yeah. Great. Okay. Well, let's touch on the legislative aspect of marketing and AI is kind of one of the final points here.
Yeah, and I think most people have heard of GDPR, this European Privacy Directive, and also there's similar directives increasingly in states in America that are limiting what marketers can do with data. And I think it's really interesting for two reasons. Firstly, it is definitely limiting what can be done. And so marketers can do much less than the technology allows, particularly in Europe. But also, I think actually some of the things people were doing were really over-engineering what was possible. And they were really heading, I talked about the creepy line, they were way over the creepy line. And I'm not sure their campaigns were that effective. I mean, there's a big thing about Cambridge Analytica and the way they took data from Facebook. And if you look at the research, the answer is that they pulled a huge amount of data, and arguably they made very little difference to elections. So arguably what they were doing really didn't swing votes as much as they made out. They were great at marketing themselves, maybe less good at changing people's views. So I think, it's important to understand legislation is going to limit things, but actually maybe a lot of the things it's stopping you doing aren't as effective as people imagine. They're like the, amazing gymnastics trick that, is incredibly difficult to do, but frankly is just not actually that impressive when you watch it.
Right. Very interesting. So are we going to see, I mean, maybe it also depends on the country, right? If GDPR, I lived in Barcelona for and Europe, I guess in general, for about 10 years or so. So, and that's when, GDPR was coming out. There seems to be a little bit less caring or concerns about that if, you're living in the States, for instance.
Well, that's really interesting because I can tell you that almost without exception, my American clients are much more worried about GDPR than my European clients.
Oh, so interesting.
When they market in Europe. And the American clients are much more conservative in how they interpret those rules. So GDPR is and one of the problems with GDPR is it's actually different from country to country. Because it's a directive, but the laws are implemented in individual countries. So, to be fair, if you're in Germany, GDPR is quite strict. If you're in Greece, GDPR is pretty relaxed. Most other countries, somewhere in the middle. And that's obviously true. I'm not picking on those two countries. Germany absolutely has the strictest, and Greece was the last European country to implement it. It was very slow. But basically, there's a lot you can do within GDPR. And so all my business is B2B. GDPR absolutely allows for you to send emails without someone opting in business to business. It says you have to say in your privacy policy that you're doing that. It also says you can't do that in consumer marketing. But, there's a lot of flexibility there. A lot of my American clients won't send emails without an explicit opt-in because they're just worried about it. It's, it's a legislation in another country. It's harder for them to understand. Just like if we're marketing in the US, we find it harder to understand US laws as well.
Right.
So, it's interesting. It's having an impact, but I think actually it's probably having an impact in a good way. And it's also driving, and maybe this is a good way to kind of, come full circle. It's also, all of this technology is saying that actually what you need to do is you need to stand out more again. And so we're going back to almost a 1950s Mad Men kind of world where actually being creative, being different, really matters. I think the one difference between the 1950s and now is that actually there's a real desire for authenticity as well. I think people being human, people making mistakes and, being seen to be, human and then apologizing or whatever, that all builds trust. And one of the issues with using too much AI is that doesn't really build trust. So I do think there's going to be a balance, and yeah, absolutely. Are we using AI? Of course we're using AI. Content generation, we're looking at it for video, we're definitely using it for, visual images. All over the place we're deploying AI, but we're also keeping that human element as well, because that's what has a really big impact. So being unique, which AI is not great at doing, and also being human is important. So to me, it's really exciting because people who really buy into this and really love the technology are going to use AI and get great results. And then people who don't buy into it, they are going to get left behind. And for sure, AI is going to have this massive impact. But to me, I think it's still the hammer. It's not taking over the job. It's still just an amazing tool.
I think that's a perfect message to end the podcast, Mike. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for coming on. We will have your LinkedIn and your website up in the show notes. Are there any other places that you want people to follow what you guys are doing, talking about? Happy to put that up in the show notes as well.
Yeah, if there are people here into, marketing B2B companies, we have a podcast, Marketing B2B Technology. So feel free to subscribe to that, or alternatively go to the Napier website and take a look at our blog. That's also got all our podcasts on there. And that's Napier, Napier, B2B.com.
Perfect. Mike, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure to talk about the future, get a glimpse into the future of marketing. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, The fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.